Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Eldridge and Company. Today I'm talking with Professor Steve Zeidman. He's a professor of law at CUNY Law School, and he directs the Defenders Clinic, and I welcome him. I want to tell you, I don't know, Steve, how you can do this work. It is so disturbing and depressing at what you have to go through to provide some sensible policies or get people to agree to you. We've just come through the annual period of clemencies when the governor rules on clemencies. They're doing it at Christmas time, although he had promised before he would do it during the year. So Steve, how do you survive?
You know, Ronnie, it's a great place to start because, every year when we consider about whether we're going to continue working with people who are seeking clemency, the question that comes up always is, are we raising false hopes? And it's because, the numbers are so slim, so few people are granted clemency. And, I have to confess, every year between my students, myself, my colleagues who I teach with, we wrestle with this. And ultimately, it's the people that we work with, the men and women inside. And I'm talking about people who did not get clemency, who call and write after the announcements come through, and they say, listen, obviously I'm crushed, I'm disappointed, but we have to keep at this. You have to keep at this. We have to keep banging on the door.
That certainly is enough to keep you going.
It is.
And it's so indicative of why they should have a different policy, because it's what gives people hope that this is going to happen. And I mean, I just don't understand it. I think we should describe, first of all, what goes on. I'd like to talk about what clemency is briefly, very briefly, and the parole.
Sure.
So tell us, clemency has two components?
Yeah, clemency has two components. And I just want to start by saying, it's in the state constitution, which I think is significant, because how many powers exist in the state constitution where the governor has unfettered vast power? And you would think those powers are there to be utilized.
Yeah.
So the governor has this vast power to grant clemency of two types: issuing a pardon for people who've been convicted, and this is 99% people who are out of prison, and it expunges or erases their conviction so that they are not deported, so that they can get various licenses. So that's the least controversial kind of pardon.
Yeah, that's the easy one, right?
That's the easy one. The harder one actually is sentence commutations. That's for people inside prison who are serving, in my case, these are folks who are destined to die in prison. They're serving 50 to life, 75 to life, life without parole. And the governor has the power to say, I'm commuting your sentence to the time you've already been in. Instead of 50 to life, you've been in 25 years, I'm resentencing you to 26 years. It's an awesome power, and it is seldom utilized.
It's so sensible, and it's so cruel. and making everybody go through this. How many applications did you file this year?
Well, we filed another 10, but we've got about 35 pending just in the last 2.5 years, probably 70 overall that are just collecting dust somewhere in Albany. And
all of these are people that you really think are very worthy of the pardon.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
Unquestionably.
And the clemency, it's such a crazy procedure. The person has to apply themselves, or do you apply on their behalf, or you fill out the applications and help them?
It's all of the above. Anybody can apply for clemency. Most people, I think, because it's so hard just to get your arms around documents and to speak to witnesses and to gather letters of support, it's really hard to do on the inside. Having said that, I have seen some remarkable clemency applications done by men and women on their own with help of their family. But what happens with us is, because we've been doing this for a while, we get letters. People saying, look, here's my background. This is who I am. Can you help me prepare an application? And we spend about a year with that person, with their family, talking about reentry, going over the crime of conviction to really put together this vast, fully vetted application, which unfortunately, in the present world, they tend to get short shrift.
A felony means that there's been a death involved?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
But those are typically the people seeking clemency are those who are convicted of admittedly very violent crime, serious crime.
Mhm.
So they're doing long sentences. And the question becomes, is there any room for recognizing and valuing transformation and redemption? And to me, Ronnie, that's the reason we have clemency, because
Right.
the system is so ludicrous, the criminal court trial system. So you have an 18-year-old kid goes to trial, is convicted, and gets 50 to life. We don't revisit that sentence for 50 years. Not when this young person turns 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, not until they're 68 years old are they even eligible for parole. So clemency is a mechanism to say to the governor and his people, hey, look at who this person is now, fix this, commute their sentence. There's no reason for them to languish in prison. They have so much to offer on the outside. Reduce their sentence and reunite them with their families and communities.
So the campaign really also, in addition to the individual, applications, the campaign is really a general campaign to urge the governor to not let that felony conviction, the murder, or whatever. What did you say it was? A violent crime. That's what it is, right? A violent crime be the counting thing. I mean, maybe we should have every minister that we could find and make it more general, rather, along with the specifics. I don't know what moves anybody. I just don't. People who are religious people and have this power and believe in redemption supposedly, but they don't.
That's exactly right. And the irony is we have the full support. When I say we, the clemency movement has the full-throated support of the faith-based community.
Yeah.
Because those are folks who really believe in transformation, in redemption, in second chances, in mercy. Yet it's the political leaders with the power to act upon it who turned a blind eye towards it. It's infuriating.
And they're afraid, and the governor is afraid that you let somebody out and then another crime happens and there you are vulnerable. It's another example of a lack of courage and conviction, isn't it? I mean, I don't mean conviction in the prison system. I mean conviction basically in your heart.
Sure. And instead of looking at it at the tens of thousands of lives that are being unnecessarily destroyed by people spending their entire lives in prison, we hold out this one possibility that someone somewhere released down the road might do something that'll end up in the paper. Mm-hmm. So we hold that out there, and it kind of it paralyzes governors. But I don't want to let them off the hook so easy, Ronnie, because I think it's not just this fear of something like that. I also think from their perspective, it's what political gain do I get?
Oh, I agree.
Right.
Or loss, I think, because they're so intimidated, it seems to me, by the law enforcement community. It's always weighed. I mean, the district attorneys, the prosecutors, the police, it's like an avalanche that they automatically just do.
They have outsized and unjustifiable power in the process, every step of the way.
The other thing I've noticed, and this is a terrible thing to say, but it's the elevation of the victims. I don't believe, and God help me that I never have to face this, but a person who's been in prison for longer than 15 years on a conviction hasn't changed and is no threat, especially if they're older, if they've been there so long. Why does the victim who still hasn't accepted the crime have almost equal say?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It comes up in the parole board context. And from where I sit, and I know people, I mean, I'm glad for the opportunity to engage in this, because when you try, so many people think you are cold-hearted, say, well, you've never been the victim. But the truth of the matter is, at trial, according now, and this is over the last 25 years, at trial, we give the victim the capacity, the ability to make a victim impact statement, to say, Judge, this is what this has done right now to me and my family. Right. But why 25 years later, we're still asking and giving that, again, another example of outsized influence, as opposed to saying, well, that was then, okay, let's really, what we should be looking at is how has the person changed in 25 years? And the victims can't speak to that. Law enforcement can't speak to that.
Right. The
And that's
parole
what-
officers.
But they certainly don't. They just want to take someone back 25, 30 years to the crime of conviction.
It is so interesting. And it's almost like cruel and unusual punishment, isn't it?
Yeah, to me it is. It's
Yeah.
this unwillingness to re-examine, this idea that a sentence once imposed remains appropriate, just, necessary in perpetuity is so misguided. And I'll tell you something, if we had a system, if there was a way to bring people in to the prison to meet the people who are applying for clemency, I am, unless you were the most cold-hearted, vengeful human being, you would come away saying, why is this woman still in prison? Why is this man still in prison? Look who they've become. And the examples, that there are countless examples of this.
I would think, I've always thought that. I agree with you totally. I mean, I was seduced in a way by meeting these women at Bedford Hills. And on another occasion, I went to Greenhaven, where I met with 3 men, one of whom had been had killed, murdered a liquor store operator. And they had written to me, this is when I worked for Governor Cuomo, they had written to me to ask me to come and they could talk to me. And they were really talking about prison reform. It was fascinating to me. Yeah. And what was the point that they were there so long? I just don't know. Has anybody with a death penalty, if there isn't an example of cruel and unusual punishment, is executing somebody after they've spent 20 years on death row? That's what's happened with all these federal executions that Trump has allowed to go on. And then they counter, don't they, with the fact that, well, it's the appeals. You don't want them to just be sentenced to death and killed right away. Yeah,
it's, you know, I'm not the one to coin the phrase, but it's the punishment paradigm that I think defines the entire criminal legal system. You know, and Ronnie, I just have to go back. You mentioned Greenhaven. Greenhaven, to me, it's one of New York's, I don't know, 50 prisons. And I just want to put names to some of the people, because this has been a particular issue for me lately. It's what we try and do with the clemency applications. Mm-hmm. Instead of talking about clemency as a concept, it's like trying to elevate the people and their families. Mm-hmm. I was invited a couple of years ago to go to Greenhaven, much like you are. I got a letter from a group of men. They were referring to themselves as the Juvenile Justice Think Tank. Mm-hmm. They were all sentenced to die in prison. 50 to life, 75 to life for crimes committed when they were 16, 17, 18 years old. So it's men like, and just bear with me, Malcolm Baptiste, Paul Leon, Paul Clark, Craig Jackson, Franz Sital, Lamar Sanchez. I met with them. Actually, there were about 100 people in the room. And what you come away with is you just go around the room. What were you sentenced to? 50 to life, 75 to life. And you engage in conversation. And now you don't have an impulsive 16, 17-year-old. You have a mature, thoughtful, generous 50-year-old who has already served 30 years, but has another 20 years to go, which, being very frank, the odds of them surviving that long, given the average age of death of an incarcerated person, is remote. So we've sentenced all these young people to die in prison. And again, no surprise, I'm thinking back to the room, the number of men in the room, it was almost exclusively Black and brown men. So it has just devastated families and communities. And the idea that we can't go back and revisit and rectify through clemency, I think just shows you that there's really no interest in doing it. It's that there's the people with the most power are more than comfortable with mass incarceration, with the devastation that has been caused.
The people who are appointed to the parole board, they're nominated and then they have to be approved by the state Senate. Is that what happens?
Correct.
Yeah. And is there ever any discussion about who they are and what they do and what principles they have? Do you know?
Well, yes. In fact, there's in the near future, coming up on January 14th, there's going to be a launch of the People's Campaign for Parole Justice. So organizations like Release Aging People in Prison and the Parole Preparation Project are constantly raising the question of who is on the parole board. Are they people with clinical backgrounds, therapeutic backgrounds, rehabilitative services, Or are they just political appointees who just, it's a job for them and they don't want to stick their neck out because they're afraid of losing their job and their benefits?
And are the state police or the police unions and the prosecutors and defense, are they in on the nominations? I mean, do they weigh in also?
It's an opaque process, but it's clear that they do, because those are the types of people who over the years have dominated the parole board,
Yeah.
law enforcement.
And what have the governor's appointments been like recently? I looked up at it, and there are, I think, 3 or 4 terms expiring soon.
Yeah, there are a number of people who are in holdover status, whose terms have expired. It's a more diverse group than it has been in the past. What it still lacks are people who have, and I understand that it's a hard thing to put your finger, who are the people who judge whether somebody is transformed, for lack of a better word. And I always struggle with that word, but who are the people who have the right kind of background and experience? Are they people from the community? Are there people, why aren't there people who are formerly incarcerated on the parole board? Who better to understand programs people did or didn't do? And so from my perspective, yes, he's changed the composition of the board, but you know, if we have miles to go to make this a fully functioning, appropriate parole board.
And how many people that you've been defending have gone to their parole hearing and been faced with the first question of, tell us about your crime?
That's the way it goes for everybody. The question is, can they ever get out in the 10 or 15 minutes that they're typically allotted? Can they ever move the conversation to what they've achieved over the past 25 years? Or are they always brought back to the crime of conviction?
And you usually get the impression that they're really not listening. They're on their way to the next person. They get a list of people they're going to see, right? And they get folders for each application.
They can do, oh yeah, they can do 60 or 70 a day. They churn people through.
And they don't look through these applications before that day?
If at best, they'll get them the night before. And whether they go through them or not, you know, I'm hard pressed to imagine anybody actually does. It's done on the fly. It's done by video.
Which is terrible also. I never got over the fact that I watched O.J. Simpson's appeal for clemency or whatever, parole, and he had his lawyer and his family. I mean, it was just incredible, right?
Yeah, you know, it is. And if you're going to try and assess who somebody is and you're doing it through a video screen, I mean, it's already setting people up, but you're setting the bar so high. But you know, it's another example. It's, again, I just want to emphasize this point, Ronnie. It's from the start to finish. So there's been a lot of talk about policing, abolishing, defunding. But then when someone is arrested, we look at the prosecution and the courts. And the prosecution is all too happy, even to this day, to ask for sentences like 50 to life, 75 to life. And the judges are all too willing to impose them. And now you fast forward, after someone's done those 25, 35 years and they get before the parole board is equally happy to say, no, we're not letting you go. It is punishment to the endless punishment is essentially what we have in New York.
You were the head of a project about the court system, weren't you? What was that?
There was an organization called the Fund for Modern Courts. Yes, that was some years ago, which was really trying to put a spotlight on the court, who the judges were, where did they come from, were they elected, were they appointed, were they diverse in experience, in race, gender, et cetera.
In the Supreme Court, this is, right?
Well, this was the entire court system.
And did you come away very pessimistic or optimistic or?
No, very pessimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still a struggle across the country, frankly, but New York is one example. Is what are the qualities you want in a judge? How do we evaluate whether someone has the capacity to wield that kind of power thoughtfully, you know, mercifully, as opposed to punitively, which is what we have.
So is it better to appoint judges or to elect them?
Oh, great question, Ronnie. You know, I'll tell you, I think, and I respect a lot of my friends who think that the best way is elections. It's just I actually think appointment, but, and it's a huge but, it depends what is the appointing authority? So if you have a nominating commission that is not dominated by, say, a governor or a mayor, but it's made up of community groups and community leaders, and they nominate people that the governor or mayor must pick from, to me, that's the best system. And I'll give you an example. There's been nothing even close to diversify the criminal court and the family court of New York City. Nothing comes close to what David Dinkins did in his term, because he had the power as the mayor to appoint. Elections never would have gotten us there. So he could just do it because he was given that power.
I've said this before in the program, not with you. For some reason, I was elected recent 2 terms now as a judicial delegate. I was appalled at the procedures.
Yeah,
I mean, controlled by this is in New York County, controlled by the county leader. You know,
right.
People would be nominated, they'd stand up and they'd say, I thank you for the nomination, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, but it's not my turn, so I would withdraw. I mean, it's such a political thing.
Correct. It's hard.
I don't understand why it's not a more major issue in the state legislature, but maybe if the assembly was included in some of these things that the Senate does, would that make a big difference?
You know, I'm more pessimistic there. I think in many ways, a lot of these judicial appointments, you see when people, whether it's term limits or whether they get defeated in a primary and election, lo and behold, suddenly they become appointed a judge somewhere. It's a horrific process.
It's crazy. But I meant also with the parole system and clemency stuff. I mean, I think that the assembly is better represents some of these communities that have higher interest. But I don't know how you do it. This is how I started the program. I really, what was it that started you on criminal law?
Oh boy, you know, it was pretty clear to me during law school that if there was one part of the law that I thought I might be in a position to contribute something, it would be addressing the problems in the criminal legal system. That's why I went to law school. Moving into the clemency and parole world, the back end, so to speak, of the system, that grew naturally out of being a public defender. You know, and I'll say this, when I say it grew naturally, nevertheless, it was a rude awakening, because most public defenders, most prosecutors, you represent somebody at the trial stage, and then when it's over, it's done.
Yeah, they don't talk to you again or anything, right?
10, 20, 25 years later, who's minding the farm? Who's saying what's been going on in that prison? How is this person going to get out before the parole board? I got a phone call this morning, Ronnie. You know, you asked, how do you keep doing it? I'll tell you what it does. I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy named Jackie Rusas, who I just have to elevate for a moment. Jackie was one of the first people I represented in the parole context. On a 25 to life sentence, he'd been in 44 years. He'd been denied parole over and over, and they kept taking him back to the crime of conviction. And it's a long story, and a state trooper was tragically killed, no question. One shot over his shoulder. The facts are,
right.
But be that as it may, at some point, you know, Jackie has expressed remorse over and over. He's a different person, and it took all this time to finally get him out. Anyway, the reason I mention this is he called this morning. He got out 3 years ago, and he wanted me to know that his lifetime parole, he was just released at age 77 from lifetime parole.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and he's grateful to be able to spend the last, this part of his life on the outside as opposed to in a cage.
Right. It's just amazing. Is it an overdose of empathy that gets people into the defense and feeling for other people? Do we have a shortage of that in the world?
I think we do. I think it's both empathy and a willingness to push back. But certainly, when I say the punishment paradigm that defines the criminal legal system, yeah, empathy it's hard to find anywhere. Even frankly, how prevalent is it among lawyers, defense lawyers? I don't know. I wish it was more. I know the diehard public defenders, the diehard appellate lawyers, those are the people who are motivated by empathy. But certainly we need more.
So now when you have a clemency appeal in and it's not given, what do you have to wait 2 years, right? Or that's a parole hearing. You don't have to wait 2 years.
You don't have to wait. That's the other problem with it, because it's so under-resourced, because most governors, not just Governor Cuomo, but most governors pay scant attention to clemency. It's certainly not, high on the list of things to deal with. It's an under-resourced office. So you send the application in, you virtually never even get an acknowledgement that it's been received.
Yeah.
You never get an acknowledgement. So when you say, can you apply again? We just applied over the last 2 years. Let's say these 20-something applications. A couple people got clemency, thank goodness. The others, we never heard anything. So we just keep supplementing the application as we get more letters of support, more information, and try to keep the application alive, try to keep it on the front burner.
We've come to the end of our program, and I'm so sorry. We have to keep this alive, so you're going to have to come back a lot of times, and you have to think about what you want to talk about, because I'm willing to give you the whole time to your own agenda. I just have so much admiration for all of you who work tirelessly to help these people.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you very much, Steve Zeidman. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.